So welcome to the presentation this evening. We're going to be talking about the road to project data analytics greatness. And this is a 2-hour masterclass this evening. And then I've actually got this sort of additional a bonus hour at the end where we've got some practical projects and there's sort of a way for you to dip your toe in the water and work on some practical real life problems that are like sort of simulate things that we're going to do at the hackathon. So if what I say in the 2 hours doesn't bore you too much and you want to see something practical, then I've got a few of my colleagues on standby to walk you through things we've been doing recently. So if I could encourage you to use Menti, and my colleague is actually going to paste the link in the chat as well. So you've got 3 ways to get to Menti. So you've either got the QR code. So if you just whip your phone out, get the camera going and point it at that QR code, then you'll be taken straight to the Menti slides. Or alternatively, if you just go to menti.com and put in the code 3822679, then you also can get inside. Alternatively, if you just click the link in the chat that my colleague is pasting, then you also should be able to make your way there as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to drop over to those Menti slides. We've just got a little bit of an introduction to why a few of us are here. So I'm just curious to see what people's motivation is. Why, why is this better than having a Chinese takeaway on a Friday evening? So some people are here because it's Friday, because of some interest, because they like data, they want to learn. Learn is generally pretty popular. Learn something new. Yes, great answer. Only 6 people so far. So again, if I could please encourage you to, if you've just joined us, head to Menti and please enter the code 3822679. It's at the top of my screen if you forget what I've just said. And please interact with this session. I think the numbers for today, I'm hoping to get around the sort of 40 mark. That would be really good. So if I could encourage everyone in the session to use Menti just to make these results a bit more worthwhile, because we usually only get about half the people engaged in this. But if I've only got 40 people on the session, I'd really like to go for 80 or 90% of engagement with this. So that'd be great. People saying they want to understand how to apply. Learn, share, learning. Yeah, that's great. Data. They're a bit intrigued. That's awesome. That's really good news. Still only 11 people. So again, please engage in the Menti if you can. Anybody having any problems, then please put it in the chat and my colleague will try and pick those up for you. So next question, I'm going at presenter pace, so you've got to wait for me, I'm afraid. So what best describes your situation at the moment? Are you just interested? Is this where you'd like your future to be? So we've got 75% of people saying that's where their future would like to be at the moment. Or do you see this as a possible career? So all positive. Just want to see where the audience is sitting. So I guess biggest proportion of the call so far, just interested in what we've got to say, but quite a few people, an equal number of people saying that, this is actually where they want to end up. So I've only had 13, 14 people engage, 15 people, that's not too bad. Okay, so numbers are pretty even. So they're evenly distributed between those 3, which is pretty good. And because we got quite a small session tonight, so like I said, I'm hoping for about 40 people. Maybe I've got the opportunity to make it a bit more tailored for you. So what topics would you like me to cover? So I think you've got a bit of flexibility. I've obviously got a lot of content prepared, but I might be able to twist it and tweak it to make it just that bit more relevant for you. So what would you like me to cover? Feel free to go mad with the Menti. See nobody in there at the moment. Here we go. I think there was a bit of a lag. So data pipelines. Okay, that's great. Python project analytics. Yeah, It's all come flooding in at once. I've got a bit of feedback coming from somebody. I don't know if you could just check that if you're not muted, just mute yourself. That'd be great. Thank you, whoever that was. Power BI, data management, automation, lessons learned. I've actually got a good lessons learned example. Implementation issues. Yes, that is a massive one. The steps in the process, we're certainly going to talk about like some steps and potential challenges as well. Data preparation for machine learning. Yeah, we're going to talk about how we can do lots of that in Python in pandas. Power BI, we're certainly going to talk about that. Simplification of data. I would say I'm going to break it down into the smaller steps as I possibly can. So automation suddenly become huge. We are definitely going to talk about Power Automate and some of the things it can do and give you some examples. Python code, we're going to walk through Python code. And if you're prepared to sit with me for the last hour as well, we're going to do something practical together. Now, this is great. I feel like what I've got in my back pocket is certainly going to satisfy the audience. So that's really, really encouraging. And if I could just have an insight into your current role. So we've got everything there from leadership and project manager and project controls to data professional. Are you in academia at the moment? Are you working on some kind of research paper? Are you in a non-project, as we say, or are you an engineer? Are you working in BIM, health and safety? When I ran this session on Wednesday, we had nobody from BIM and nobody from health and safety, which was quite surprising. And obviously we seem to be mirroring the audience again. So we had a lot of consultants and a lot of leadership on Wednesday. So interesting to see that we're actually got most people are sort of project managers, project controls. We've got some data people here, which is great. I guess that's why people are asking about deployment, because they've sort of mastered some of the data. They want to know how they can put what they've done into sort of practical use for the organization as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this data and then I'm going to segment it over some of the questions that are coming up. So thank you for 25 people. That's pretty good going. I'm pretty happy with that. So thanks everyone. I know I've nagged. So how big of an impact do you think project data analytics will have on your role within the next 3 years? Are you thinking it's going to have no impact? Are you thinking minor impact? Are you thinking significant impact, or maybe a major impact and it's going to completely evolve? And maybe a major impact if I don't adapt and then I may become obsolete. And what I've done is actually segmented that automatically over the leadership. So it's interesting to see where people sit. Certainly the data professionals are thinking if they don't adapt, then their role might be slowly eaten away by automation and other technologies. So that's really interesting to see. The consultants thinking there's certainly going to be a significant impact, but maybe not to their role. Really interesting. Project managers and project controls certainly think there will be impact. A lot of sort of half the project managers, project controls people are thinking that if they don't adapt, then there may be some consequence for their role. And really great to see nobody thinks there's no impact. So looks like we've got the right audience, which is great. Right, so that's enough of Menti for the time being. Really appreciate everybody engaging in that, and I will certainly be coming back to that. So don't close that link in your browser or on your phone. I will be picking that up again in just a few minutes. So a bit of an agenda for this evening, just to cover what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to give my classic kind of what is project data analytics if you don't know, and then a bit of a justification of why we've got to do something, why must we act? And then I'm going to talk about the impact on your organization and role. And I'm going to cover what does greatness look like. So an overview of the current capabilities and how we might be able to apply them in a project context. And then I'm going to kind of take a step back and say, you know what, it's not all about the tech. It's not all about learning about Python. It's not going to solve everything for us. And then I'm going to give you some sort of tips about how you might be able to start your own journey. So whether you're in a leadership role or you're an engineer or you're a project manager, then hopefully I will be able to give you sort of a few tips about where you can where you can go from here. And then, like I mentioned at the end, so that's all going to take about 2 hours. And then at the end, we've got this bonus 1 hour where we're going to do something practical. So I would say, as a bit of a warning, is that for the Python, you won't need any software at all. We do it all in the browser. But if you want to use something like the PowerApps or Power BI, you're going to need those. Power BI is certainly going to need Power BI Desktop. And for PowerApps, you're going to need an Office 365 license. So if you haven't got those things, then I'd recommend dropping into one of the other sessions. So start off with giving my usual community spiel about what is project data analytics. And really, project data analytics refers to the process of extracting, examining, transforming, and rearranging and arranging data to extract useful information and insights, sometimes even predictions that will inform our decisions on projects. And on the right-hand side, you can see we've got the Gartner analytic value escalator. And this shows the evolution of an organization all the way from descriptive and diagnostic analytics, where we're kind of building dashboards. We're looking at what happened and what did happen, all the way to predictive and prescriptive analytics, where we start to understand what will happen, and then maybe even how can I make it happen. And this is actually a really great diagram, because it gives most people in the business can look at this and say, you know what, we're sat around here at the moment, or we're sat right at the top. And it also gives you sort of a very high level, very high level roadmap for your sort of aspirations as well. So you might know, well, we're absolutely fine in diagnostic, we don't need anything else, but immediately you can say, you know what, we would really benefit from being in this kind of predictive or prescriptive space as well. And a bit more sort of context on the community and what project data analytics is. And if you look at this image at the top, which Martin, the CEO of Projecting Success, and I have presented many times, is this idea of Crossrail, and what Crossrail collect as a project. And they have the program technical information, and they have the program control information. And if you think of all the control information, so all the schedules and costs, all the change control, risk management, all the legal information, health and safety, procurement, all of that is an exhaust plume of data. And when the project's finished, it's either archived, best case, or worst case, it's even just deleted. And we really believe that projects shouldn't be seen as a one-through process, and we should be leveraging all that experience from our portfolios to improve project delivery performance in the future. And that's what we've really been deriving for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. And project data analytics isn't just dashboards. Okay, it's not just about creating dashboards. I've seen dashboard overload in the industry since I've been working sort of in the data space. And a survey from our panel event on data analytics and project controls on the 14th of October showed that the people that are active in project data analytics are really, 90% of them are using dashboards. And there's actually so much more we can do by using models and creating things like automation as well. So I really think a lot of people are sitting in the kind of descriptive space, and there's actually so much more benefit there for organizations. And a bit of inspiration into why we've got to act. And if you haven't heard of this before, this is the iron law of projects. So this was a sample size of nearly 12,000 projects, just under 50%, so 47.5% of these projects were on budget, 7.8% of them on budget and on time or better, and just a tiny 0.5% of them were on budget, on time, and on benefits or better. So if you think of, when you sign a business case, you're committing to completing that project, and 1 in 200 projects are on budget, on time, and on benefits or better, which is it's a pretty horrendous statistic. And I guess that's the whole kind of ethos around the community. Now I've introduced sort of what project data analytics is and what the community is, I should probably introduce myself. So I am, my name is James Smith. I'm sure I know most of you in the call, and I'm the CTO of Projecting Success. And I've been working for the company for about 3 years. So, Bryden Wood. Now, this is an organization that had developed a system that can interpret and process the logic required for new motorway design. So it takes into account things like the junctions, the bridges, I guess, changing elevation, the hills, how steep those hills are. And I think if we can do this with the road, then why can't we do it with a project? A project is, again, a lot of the time is not necessarily using kind of human intuition, it's applying logical steps to scenarios that we've seen before. So why can't we do this with projects? And if we can understand the life cycle of every risk identified on every project, then can we begin to predict the risk in the future and even preempt them? And a slide that we talk about a lot in the community is this idea of predisposition. So we know that people are predisposed to illness. Sometimes this is driven by DNA, sometimes by lifestyle factors like smoking or, maybe not moving enough or whatever it might be. And I am predisposed to sciatica and bulging discs because the discs in my spine are too close together, and that's some predisposition I have in my DNA. And what we think is that if people are predisposed to things, we believe that projects are as well. And I believe the next slide really proves that. So this is a project performance map, which shows a very, very high aggregated level, but certain projects are certainly more predisposed to variance than others. So if you look at the mean cost overrun of, say, the solar projects on the left and energy transmission projects, the 1% and 8% mean cost overrun. And if we compare that with the Olympics or nuclear power or even dams, then the mean cost overruns there are absolutely massive. So there's obviously something in these projects that that is very difficult for us to predict as humans. We obviously get it wrong a lot. And again, the mean schedule overruns, you can see in column 4 there, solar power, again, having a 0% mean schedule overrun. And the Olympics at the bottom, very interesting as well. Obviously, the Olympics cannot be late. So 0% mean schedule overrun. But the nuclear power, again, really quite big. So if we can see that certain projects, certain types of projects are predisposed to this kind of problem, but we don't have any causality here. We don't know why this is happening. All we can see is that it is happening. So we need to connect this with things like work breakdown structure, the conditions, value, teams. And once we've done that, we can see which factors have the greatest influence on the variance. So let's talk about what's happening in project data analytics at the moment. So there are some really specialist companies like Mplan, whose tagline is, they are the next generation of risk assurance. And what Mplan are doing is they are predicting the outcome of construction projects to help us understand complexity and risk. And Dev has actually been, he's the CEO, to the project data analytics meetup, I think 3 or 4 times, I can't remember. And he provides a really fascinating insight into what Mplan have been doing. And they've recently kind of partnered with Network Rail, and they're rolling into a new phase of deployment where they're providing, again, kind of schedule insights for Mplan. They've got a really bespoke deep learning model that reads in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of schedules, and provides, again, really useful predictions for that type of project. And if you want to see more of that, then there's more on our YouTube page. I mean, Dev is an incredible presenter, so if that's of interest to you, then please go and check him out. And then this is a project that was very close to my heart. So this is something we worked on internally with a client. We actually worked towards creating bid predictions and providing analytics for procurement. So we web scraped well, we web scraped some data and we connected it with data that we could get from an API around contract awards. And we took information from TED, we took information from Contracts Finder and a couple of paid sources as well. And then we also collected a completely separate siloed set of information on bid feedback from construction projects. And we got that through a series of FOI requests. And then using the contract award data, we built a machine learning classification model to tell you with a new contract that came up, if we had things like the client, the value, the location, sometimes even the materials that we used, obviously things like the number of floors, etc., the client, I may have said that, we could tell you with a certain probability which supplier would win it. And what was really interesting is that the client was actually massively impactful in how accurate we could be. So for, I don't know if you can read this, but for example, Network Rail at the top, we could say with a 50% certainty if Network Rail were advertising a contract, then we would be right 50% of the time. And we use the FOI data to build dashboards so that people could benchmark themselves with things like environmental sustainability, health and safety against all of their competitors. So it was a kind of one-stop shop really for procurement. And something else that's happening in project data analytics, so Shark Tower. Now, interestingly, Shark Tower, we were actually with us on Wednesday night. So they were at the meetup and they gave a fascinating insight into their business. And I think, I don't know if the video has been released, but if it hasn't been released, it will be released shortly. And again, my colleague is going to post a link in the chat where you can read a bit more about that event. But Shark Tower, it allows project managers to quickly search skills and availability, identify things like workload issues, and it's a really intuitive system. And again, Shark Tower gave a really good insight into the strides they're making forward in this area. So if you want to check that out, then please click on the link that should just have appeared in the chat. Forecast. So again, Forecast are working in project data analytics, and they're trying to remove the need for a human input in the planning stages of project management. So the algorithm knows your resource availability, it knows your resource constraints, and it lets the project manager concentrate on adding value elsewhere. And really what I'm getting at so far in the presentation is that project delivery is very process focused. And if we can describe that process with logic, then we can probably automate it. I'm not talking about automation, about automating payment systems. I'm talking about automating projects. So sort of generalizing my idea of bride and wood. If we can describe all of the logic, then we can probably take a lot of steps towards like automating the delivery of that project. And yeah, maybe some of it does require human intuition, and then we might need to get slightly better at maybe augmenting the way in which we think, but we can certainly make big strides forward in making projects more efficient. And then one particular example, without pointing the finger too much, is that Balfour Beatty worked with Innovate UK for a fairly significant sum of money to automate bin naming conventions. And we actually worked on a very similar project, and we managed to deliver. I mean, I didn't see what Innovate UK created, but certainly the brief, we managed to deliver a significant part of that in just with 1 week's worth of effort using off-the-shelf tools like UiPath, where a document could be emailed to a bot. The bot would pick up that attachment, open it, read in the first page, figure out what the document was. Then it would compare it with a database and say, okay, it needs this particular type of naming convention. It's got this author, etc., etc. Name it appropriately and then send it back to the author. So from I guess from a project professional's perspective, it's great because you just fling your document off to this email account, which you're very familiar with using Outlook, and then 60 seconds later, you get your document back and it's been named appropriately for you and even stored in the right location. within your document storage system. And I guess, you know, a big question that's on our mind is, will this disrupt procurement? And I guess if you think about the MEAT kind of method for developing, prioritizing contracts, the most economically advantageous tender, this is what most clients use when trying to work out which tenders to bid for. And this was developed in 2014. I think this will really change a lot. So I think data will become a much more valuable resource, and projects won't be seen as a once through activity, and the data that a supplier could provide to a client will actually make them much more valuable, so that they'll see all of the jobs they've got as a big pipeline. They won't be seen as a once through process. And if they can get data from good data from a supplier, then that client might value that supplier slightly higher. So I think MEAT will evolve as well, which is really interesting because it's relatively new. And this idea of centralized versus federated, this is something we talk about a lot in the community. And I'm sure everyone on the call today has seen data slowly encroaching its way into all of our roles. We're all dealing with Excel documents that are emailed to us, or things that are saved in SharePoint. We've got trackers that use Excel a lot. We're all using data more and more every single day, and this is not going to slow down. I think this revolution is really going to accelerate, and we're going to be using data more and more. And I think if you're not equipped to deal with that change, then those roles or those aspects of your job are going to be taken away from you. And if you're not part of automating them and making them more efficient, then your role just could get smaller and smaller. So what I really think we do is we need to move away from this kind of centralized data scientist, data analytics team that you see on the left, where project people kind of ask them for a report and that information feeds back to them and it's clunky and slow. And we need to move to a kind of more modern system where data capability feeds into project people. So I'm not saying that we need to remove that specialist team, because that's too much for people to learn about deep learning models and how to build their own machine learning models. But I think that team's, the scope of that team will probably get smaller, and the rest of the business will be able to handle the things we're doing day to day in a much more efficient, much more accurate way that certainly will add a lot of value to a business. I'm just going to jump back to Menti, because I want to pose this question of where do you think the project data analytics roles are heading in your business? So if I could please get you to jump back to Menti, that would be really great. So do you think they're mainly centralized, mainly federated into project roles? Is it 50-50, or is it too early to tell? So we've got up to the 40 mark, 42 people on the call now. And almost 3/4 of us think it's too early to tell, although as I say that, the numbers change. Only 10% of us think it's 50-50. So I think it certainly seems like most people agree with me. So 40% of people saying mainly centralized. And I wonder if I should have asked that question really before I gave my sort of what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. I should have really compared the differences. Mainly federated into project roles, about 1/4 of us saying that. We've only had 25 people respond. So if I could bump that up to more like 30, that would be great. Still people entering the call as well, which is absolutely fine. But a lot of people saying it's a bit too early, not quite sure what's going to happen. I wonder if I will be able to change your mind a little bit as the evening goes on. Okay. So time to jump back to PowerPoint. And I'm going to talk about how this might impact some of your roles. And I'm afraid I've picked on project management, and we've got a few project managers here, so I try not to scare you too much. But if you think of data science and automation sort of chipping away at project delivery roles, and I think project management is no different. So if I've got just an extract there from the APM on the left-hand side, you can see what project management typically includes. I'm just going to pick on the first few. So the first one is planning what work needs to be done and who is going to be doing it. And really, this is what forecast is for. So I don't suppose that project managers will be doing that as much as they would going forward, because there are going to be tools available that do it for them. And again, the second one, looking at risks involved in a particular project and managing these. Well, really, this is what MPlan do. The risks are contained inside the data they're loading into their model, and then the project is designed to include those risks. I think forecasts have a risk aspect to their particular solution as well. So again, something that will certainly change a lot. And this is meant to be a significant part of a project manager role. Making sure the work's done to the right standard. So, I mean, this is really quite niche, but something that we developed out the back of one of our hackathons, and I'll talk about those more later on, was that standards could be checked on a particular document, for example, and that could be uploaded to a server. That could all be checked automatically. Recommendations could be made, and we're just talking about just a few seconds to get those kind of recommendations. So again, that kind of work, and I appreciate that number 3 there is quite a broad thing, but that's just one example of where the idea of a project manager checking somebody's work like that might be fundamentally different in years to come. And this is actually an extract, again, from the panel event on project controls that we had on the 14th of October. We had about 150 people on the call, and we had about half of them engage in the Menti slides. And 38% of people said they're only experimenting and using pilots at the moment, which is a massive proportion. And if you think these are the people that are in the community, these are the people that are signed up for our project data analytics event. So they're certainly going to be, it's not a representative of the population. You know, these are the people that I thought would be, you guys tonight would be the people that I thought would be engaged, really pushing these forward. You know, nearly 40% just running pilots and experimentation. And, you know, 21 and 19% are minor and inconsistent. So a massive proportion of people could be doing more with project data analytics, using it in their organizations. And something else I wanted to pick up on was a question we asked about envisaging project controls evolving. So again, just like I picked on project management today, we certainly picked on project controls during that panel session. And 72% of people thought that there would be a major change, or at least the role would be very, very different. So again, looks like we had 72 people respond to that, and nearly 3/4 of them think that project controls is going to change massively. And only one person thinks that there will be no change. So again, I think there is certainly this data revolution is going to really evolve a lot of roles rapidly, and we all need to sort of do our best to prepare ourselves for that. So to pick up on something that really came out the back of the panel session was that there's this perception that this is going to impact reporting roles more than others. And it'd be interesting to compare tonight's Menti results with what actually happened on Wednesday. So if we jump over to Menti and I swap the slides, if you could please grab your phone or swap back to the Menti browser and just answer this question for me about which roles will be impacted the most. So like I said, there was certainly a feeling that reporting is going to be affected massively. And that's not something that I necessarily think is true. And I've certainly talked to some of my colleagues about this in more detail. And I wanted to see if the audience this evening agreed with what the panel session thought. Documents roles are going to change massively. Okay. Reporting, not quite as high as scheduling. So scheduling and document control is really going to change. risk management, cost engineering. So the results really quite different to what we had the other night, really interesting. So reporting was very, very high. Risk management was very, very high. BIM was actually still quite low. And I really think, I'm surprised by the BIM. I think there is certainly, I know BIM is quite data focused already. I think there's a lot that could change in BIM. And document controls was very low. I think automation in document controls is going to change it, change the role completely. I really believe we've got some document controllers on our project data analytics apprenticeship inside of the academy, and they're really, really sort of interested in lots of the automation because they know that they need to stay current with these things because they think that document controls is about to go through quite a big period of change. That's really interesting. Certainly, reporting isn't the highest, which does seem to contradict what we had on Wednesday. So, thank you for voting on that. And I'm actually going to jump back to my slides. So, just talking about the Gartner analytic value escalator again. Like I said, this is where most organizations are. They're really sat in this descriptive, potentially sort of diagnostic stage. And this chart's great because, like I said, it shows you where you want to be as an organization. A lot of us want to aspire to be in the predictive, prescriptive stage. But all of these things are driven by, like, it's not easy to get up there. It's really difficult. In fact, it's so difficult to have the right data. It's difficult to have alignment between data and use cases. And if you don't know what I mean, I'm going to go into that in detail a bit later on because it's a real bugbear of mine. Data volumes and quality, we don't have the right connections. Data is generally pretty siloed. We might not have the right data. It might not have the right context. Much more. But I'm going to break down challenges and barriers later on in the presentation. So what does greatness look like? And I'm going to talk about some more tool-based things in a few minutes. So I really want to know a bit more about you guys and what's your level of knowledge and of the sort of core capabilities that we need for project data analytics. So there's 5 things to vote on: Power BI, Python, automation, apps, and databases. Have you never used it, or are you a ninja? We've got 43 people on the call, so I'd love to have, 70% of us. I'd love to have sort of 35 people responding to this. That would be really great. Only 5 of us so far. So just doesn't matter if you've never used it. I just really want to know. And so I'm going to talk about Power BI. I'm going to talk about Python. I'm going to talk about automation. I'm going to talk about apps. And I'm going to touch on databases. So based on where you are on these, I can either go into a little bit more detail, a little bit less detail. So it's definitely in your interest to vote on these things. Databases are really high. We've even got some ninjas in the call, which is great. Python has a habit of always being, I've never used it, or ninja. It's a bit kind of Marmite in that respect. Automation, again, it's actually pretty surprisingly low. Power BI is usually pretty evenly distributed. It's sitting quite low. Power BI, I would have thought the score will be a bit higher, but again, it is quite even across the whole scale there. I certainly will give a bit more insight. If I could just push it up to 30, that would be great. I'm just going to nag you a bit more. Sat on 27 people voting so far. But from that, I can certainly give a bit more of an insight into Python and automation as well, and apps, because those are the 3 lowest there. Right. I'm going to move on back to the slides. So some examples, what's been happening as part of the community. So hopefully you've heard of our Project Hack events. We've actually got the next one on the 7th and 8th of November, and I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about that later on. this evening. But I wanted to provide you with a bit of kind of inspiration of what's come out of some of our hacks. So we're on Project Hack 7 is next month. And at Project Hack 5, Challenge 3, the problem was to identify a solution that could read in a specification and automatically pull out any issues or mistakes in real time. And the solution was incredible. So they built a web app in the weekend that you could upload a document to, and it would loop over all of the text, paragraphs and sentences in that specification, and then would automatically highlight it with particular errors like the wrong date or sector, etc. And then it would color code them for you and even provide recommendations and solutions. It was a really fantastic solution. I believe it was the winner of Project Hack 5. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. And then Project Hack 2. So Robert McAlpine provided some snagging data, and we managed to build I say we, I don't think I was involved, but I'm going to take the credit, why not? An intelligent dashboard that didn't just give kind of aggregated information about sort of what's been happening. It gave a breakdown to the causality of why these issues are reoccurring, and that was a really successful challenge. And I think Sir Robert McAlpine got a lot of benefit from that, which was really great to see. We had the last hackathon, Project Hack 6, Challenge 9. Baker Hughes actually presented this challenge. They wanted to understand a bit more about their activity duration variance. It was really great because we had two teams on this challenge. So they were kind of in direct competition, I guess you could say, which meant that they were really kind of motivated, and this sort of, they had the opportunity to almost kind of bounce ideas off each other and compete with each other. So we had both of those teams came up with fantastic solutions, and they created a machine learning model which they hosted in Azure ML, and they actually deployed it into an interactive Excel spreadsheet, that a planner could use. So it was something really kind of a digestible solution for a planner that used sort of black box machine learning. They didn't really necessarily understand it, but they could use the predictions that came out the back of it. And I've got, as part of the sort of project later on in the bonus section, the bonus 1 hour masterclass, I'm going to walk through what the other team actually created at a very high level, because you wouldn't be able to understand all of the code, but I can tell you the sort of steps involved in starting off with a piece of data to building a machine learning model and getting predictive insights out the back of it. So another example, Project Hack 5, Challenge 5. I remember this challenge really well. This was Safety Steve, and the idea was to create an application that records a hazard that's been spotted on, say, a construction site in a hands-free way. So people don't want to be pulling out phones and having to take pictures or write pieces of text which, you know, lack context, or because they're too busy, or their hands are cold, or wherever it might be, or the hands are filthy. So they created a solution in Dialogflow, and then they actually, so that was kind of Google's virtual assistant, and then it wrote that information into a Firebase database that stored it all in a logical hierarchy. And the great thing about this is that the data was processed on the fly, so it was already organized and cleaned for you. And if you know about kind of processing information that you get from sort of site diaries, generally it can be pretty messy, and if you've got garbage in, then you're probably going to have garbage out. So it was a really great solution. I believe that they won. The demonstration they showed from 2 days was incredible. It really blew everybody away. So I'm going to talk about some PDA tools, project data analytics tools. And these are actually tools that we cover and use on the apprenticeship in order to kind of really excel in project delivery. You need to know a lot about all of these tools and a lot more. Today, we're going to be just taking a slightly closer look at a subset of them. So we're only going to be looking at Power Automate, Power BI, Python, and then Microsoft Power Apps. So not necessarily just the Microsoft suite, because we're also going to look at some open source tools like Python, but I'm going to give you an overview of these four and show you where they can be used in a project data analytics context. And once we've done that, I'm also going to take a step back. So I don't want to say it's all about just upskilling and learning all about the tools. It's how you, I think it's so much more than that. It's the challenges that are in front of us and the barriers that are in front of us are not just about, you know, throwing ourselves into these tools. It's so much more of that, and we'll talk about that more later on. So Python, hopefully you've heard of Python. It was the lowest scoring in the Menti, so I will spend a little bit of time explaining. But it's a general purpose programming language that's relatively young. So it was only released in 1991. And really, Python is so popular because its design emphasizes code readability. And compared to other languages, it uses a lot of white space, which means it's so easy to read. And the indentation that Python is kind of famous for is such a nice way of showing when a particular piece of code needs to stop running, like a loop, for example, only loops where you've indented. Once you finish that loop, you can drop from that indent back to the start. So it's open source and free to use for any application, which is great if you're working and you want to use it commercially, because there are just no restrictions, nothing to worry about in that setting. And it's probably the most flexible language out there with an extremely low learning curve. It's native to Mac and Linux, so you can just open a terminal and start writing Python. If you want to use it on Windows, though, you do have to go to python.org and install, but I wouldn't do that personally. I would recommend installing something like Anaconda distribution, because then you get a nice package manager which manages everything for you, and you also get Spider and Jupyter, which I will show you later on. If you want to ask me more about that later on, that's absolutely fine. So Python, it can be used for so many different things. It can be used for creating desktop applications, like you could create a calculator quite easily in Python, for example. It's used for creating websites. More recently, it's used for building and deploying machine learning models, which is why its popularity has just exploded. It's used for automation. So some of our apprentices use Python at the moment for brute face automation. Just one second. So some of our apprentices are using Python at the moment for automating things they do. So you can use Selenium for opening browsers and filling in information. It's certainly the learning curve is quite a lot higher than using traditional automation tools like UiPath or Power Automate, but you can do so much with Python in terms of automation. It's unbelievable. You can also use it for building games. You can use it for data cleaning. So you can use things like pandas for reading in data and building data pipelines, and also data analysis as well. Things like matplotlib and NumPy are really good for that. So the first example I'm going to walk you through is this example of data concatenation in Python. And if you can imagine that somebody has been giving you these notepad documents. So imagine somebody's been handing them for you for, say, the last 5 years, and you've got about 1,600, say 1,656 to be example. And I've pasted a couple of them on screen there so you can read them, and they contain comma separated information around, and it's actually lessons learned information from NASA. So you think, okay, I could open them one by one, paste them all into the same notepad document, and then save it, and then I could open it in Excel. It will probably take me 5 hours to do that. I might have some kind of headache or brain hemorrhage at the end of it, but in theory I could do that. But what we can do with Python is, and regardless of the kind of format, because we can fix all of that. If we can fix it for one of them and it's consistent, then we can fix it for all of them. We can tell Python to look at a folder and say, okay, build me a list of all the files in that folder with the same extension. In this case, it would be .txt for the text file. And then we can say for each item in that list, I want you to open it, extract the text, do some kind of manipulation with it. Maybe it's change the commas into hyphens or reverse the order of the list or whatever it might be, or take out the last element of the list. And then we can open a new file and then one by one add that new list with a carriage return at the end to that new file and create a kind of holistic data source. And what I'm going to do is try and show you a demo of that live. So on the right hand side, I've got Python. This is actually Spider. So this is what we call an IDE. So it's where you can kind of save and run code nicely. And it's all kind of, it provides you with autocomplete and auto indenting and it's really good for debugging. And it's a really nice way of, you can save scripts in here. So much nicer than running it in the console where you don't really have that control. On the left hand side, these are all the lessons learned individual files, all 1655. Also, maybe I lied, maybe there's one less. And what I can do is just with this tiny bit of code, like I said, uses a package, opens a new file, we point it at a particular folder and look for this extension txt, and then we loop through each file, opening it and then writing it to this new file. So if I run it here, you can see the script is now running and it will take probably about 10 seconds. You see it's created the file, and the file will be growing in size because all of these things will be written to it in succession. You can see it's just finished now. So we can go and we can open this in Excel and have a look at that file. And there you can see that's the sort of holistic view of that information. So if you could imagine, maybe this could be form information that's coming in from a Microsoft form, for example, and you want to like look at it all holistically, or maybe you're doing this locally. Maybe this is something that you end up collating information like this a lot, or you have somebody junior in the team that does this. You know, you don't need to do these things anymore. Once we've got this script as well, we can apply it, and you can see in just a few seconds we can we could then start to visualize this information in Power BI and get kind of useful insights in that way. So a very, very basic example of concatenation. Again, Python's sort of really sort of built for that kind of thing. Another example of using Python would be cleaning data. So there are four ways. So this is the sort of formal way of cleaning data. There are 4 things you can do if you have an issue. You can accept it and just say, oh, that's fine, I'm just going to keep it. You can reject it and remove a value or that row. You can estimate the value of an attribute. So create a default value like the mean or the median, for example, or you can change it to deal with the issue and correct it. So maybe it's an outlier and you want to just say, I'm going to take 10% of all the 10% off the top of all the outliers or the bottom or whatever it might be. And now I'm going to drop us into another. So I'm just going to exit this briefly. And this is actually Jupyter Notebooks. So when I recommended installing Anaconda and I said you got, and we showed you the Spider IDE, that was the one I showed you first of all, but you also get Jupyter. So this is what we call a Jupyter Notebook. It runs locally, but it runs in the browser. So I use Jupyter Notebooks a lot when doing presentations because of the way all this additional information I can write in here to describe the code makes it really useful. And then you actually code in these cells. So I can run this. I can just importing the pandas package there we use for lots of our ETL processes. And then I just run each cell like this. So now I'm importing this site diary data is site diary data. We had a hackathon from sort of like Alpine, and I could just say, I just want to look at the top 10 rows here. We're going to clean this data live. So We're just going to have a quick look at it, see if we can see any problems. See, the zone has only NAN values in there, the same as other weather data. So I can assure you that's NAN all the way down. We have underscores here, and we'd really want spaces. And this is all capital. We don't really want that. I might capitalize the first letter. If I wanted to do any analysis, I probably wouldn't want these degrees in here. Probably just want the float. So there's a few things we can jump in and change. There's also, got a double ID column here. I don't really need that. I'd quite like one ID. I'm quite happy for that to be blank. I don't really want this one. So lots and lots of things we can work on. So I'm just going to have a look at the length of the data frame first of all. So I can see immediately there are 287 records in here. And I'm actually going to work on the reject method first of all. So we're just going to get rid of some things we don't want. So here we're going to get rid of that ID column that we mentioned, and the other weather data and zone. Remember, they were all NANs. So we don't want those. We're just going to get rid of them just using drop columns. Then again, we can look at the headers. The ID is nicely gone now. That zone and other weather data columns are also gone, which is great. And then we run this correct method. So what we're doing here is we're going to replace that underscore with a space, and I'm actually going to convert those to a title. So just uppercase is only the first letter, and everything else will be lowercase. So we just run that. We define the function there, and then the column I'm running, sorry, the cell I'm running now, just applies those two functions. And now I'm going to assign a new function. So this is cleaning the temperature. So I mentioned that we had some potentially unnecessary units on the back of those. I don't really want the degrees, because if I want to do something in Power BI, okay, we could sort that in Power BI, but I just want them as float variables. I define the function, I apply those functions. Again, we can look at the headers here. So you can see the weather data has been sorted out nicely, and I've managed to take that unit off the back of the temperature. I'm here cleaning the wind speed and applying that again in exactly the same way. So just the miles per hour here, we're just removing that from the back. Create a default value method. So here you can see within the time, sometimes I've just got AM within some of these times, and that's not really useful. So I'm just going to define a function that takes AM or PM and replaces it with nothing, just because that's not providing any benefit. And then last of all, I'm just going to do a quick check. So I check my data, just check head here just gives you the top 5 rows, so the index from 0 to 4, and we can see okay, everything looks pretty clean. I can see those AMs and PMs have gone. These are nice floats now. So is the wind speed mile an hour. Everything looks really sorted out. And then the last thing I can do is I can say that data frame, I want to save it to CSV as site diary clean.csv. So I run that, and now I've got a local copy of that file that I want to use. And okay, I've done a lot of that locally, but if you could imagine this data was coming in from a Power App, for example, and you had Python running on a virtual machine, or you had it running in Azure Functions, and the data was passed to it through a data pipeline, we could reuse this script every time. So this script, if you had this data coming in from a site diary, then the script would clean it, and then you could, before you'd pipe it into your SQL Server or into your data lake or whatever you're doing. So you'd use exactly the same kind of coding packages and techniques, so using pandas to do these things. And that's how you would use Python to sort of build a pipeline. If you do these things in Excel, okay, you can use macros, but a lot of people would be able to clean that very quickly, but it's a once through process. Once you've done it, you've got to do it again if you've got more data. Whereas if I add more data into that, I can run the Python script again, and even locally, that's much more efficient with my time than using something like Excel. And I wanted to give a bit of sort of some specific examples about when we use Python at our hackathons. And I've got these two use cases that I'm going to talk you through. So Python was used at the last hackathon to create a machine learning model that predicts activity duration variance for Baker Hughes. I mentioned that there were two teams for that, and I've already talked about what one team did. And I'm going to talk through in a bit more detail about what the next team did. And then second of all, I'm going to talk about how we actually use Python for some of our operations for the hackathon. So how we don't really create presentations anymore. We use Python to do that for us in an automated way, and I'll say more about that in just a moment. So concentrating on number one for the time being. So what Baker Hughes wanted to know is they wanted to understand in a bit more detail about their activity duration variance and what was really affecting it. So they provided a lot of schedule information, and the interesting thing about this schedule information is that it had a really well-structured hierarchy that we could break down and create dummy variables from, which we could build our machine learning model on. And out the back of the hackathon, they created a really, really great solution. And we've actually picked this up and we've refined what the team did a little bit. We've changed the modeling slightly and increased the accuracy. And the really exciting thing is we're talking to Baker Hughes, to their planning department about how this can actually be implemented. So it's such a success story for the hack. It's exactly what the hackathon should be doing, and I'm really, really proud of the fact that it's benefiting organisations like Baker Hughes and providing them with more accurate estimations for their projects. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I should also say, I'm going to go back actually, is that this is what I'm talking about in the bonus section. So we've got a significantly simplified version of the code that I am going to give to people who want to drop into that session. I believe it's project 3, but I'm not sure. And I'm going to show you how to run that in a Google Python environment, so a real Python environment on Google servers, and you can run the code yourself and do your first bit of machine learning. So a quick plug there for my project. Second of all, I'm going to talk about how we use Python to speed up operations for the hack. So if you've ever been to one of our hackathons, we release a deck for each challenge, which tells you about all the details you might need to know for the challenge, all about the data, all about the sort of user stories and use case, the detailed description, a sort of high-level description, what type of challenge it is. And we collect all this information from the challenge owners. So we actually send them a form, they fill in a detailed form for us. We collect this information into, it goes into a SharePoint site for us. And then from that SharePoint site, we can point Python at it and say, okay, now we've got the title, the description, and the 15 other fields that we collect. And we can say, okay, from that, I've got all the images I need. I need you to make the slides. And it would be a lot of copying and pasting for somebody, but we don't need to do that anymore. So on the right-hand side, I've got my terminal, and the left-hand side, I've got the folder where I want the files to finally appear. So I navigate to the right place on my machine, and then I'm just loading the Python file. And you can see it's got to load quite a few different packages from GitHub to actually run the code. All the images were all the kind of background images for the slides were all just repeated. So we could put those all in an image folder and then tell the script just to look them up and then loop through. So say we've got 15 different challenges, it looped through each row in the SharePoint list and then created a new deck for each one of those items. So you can see it's creating the files now. It's created those 12, and I can just open challenge 1 in PowerPoint to show you. And you can see there's quite a few pages in there as well. They're all different. They're exactly the slides that we would make, but we just don't have to do that anymore. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk about data visualization. Just a quick check of the time. So I'm sure we're all familiar with data visualization, but really it's the graphical representation of information and data. And by using visual elements like charts, graphs, and maps, and visualization tools, then they provide an accessible way for us to sort of understand trends and outliers, and of course patterns. And there are some really, really great platforms out there like Domo, Tableau, Power BI. And I'm going to talk about Power BI in a bit more detail because Power BI has really stolen the show here. It has sort of dominated the market in the last 3 years. And I believe that's because of the model that they've developed and the amount of connections that Power BI has. So Power BI have sort of 3 basic elements to it. It has Power BI Desktop, which is an application that you can download on your Windows machine. You can't download it on a Mac. And Power BI Desktop is free. Okay, so you can build, maybe it's worth me kind of trying to highlight sort of Microsoft's system here, because how you pay for Power BI does certainly confuse people. But that's completely free. You can do what you want with that. And then you have the Power BI service where you can publish your dashboard. If you just have Power BI free, and you don't have Power BI Pro, then you can publish, but you can only publish to your workspace, which is pretty pointless. And in order to share those, if you wanted to share it onto, say, a SharePoint site, so you could have some aggregated information or summary statistics on the top of a SharePoint site, then you would need Power BI Pro to share that with that SharePoint site, or share it with a colleague. Or if you had stand-ups in the morning and you wanted the Power BI report shared as part of that stand-up call in Teams to show if people are, how late people are on average, or whatever it might be, just to point the finger at them and say, you're always late to stand-ups, and I don't have to tell you that because we're just all looking at the dashboard of you always being late. Then again, you need Power BI Pro for that as well. You also need Power BI Pro for doing any scheduling, refreshing of your reports once you've published them to the service. And then of course you have Power BI Mobile as well, which is also free. So any reports you create, you can look at them if you publish them on Power BI Mobile. And then there are some great third-party tools as well, like the Best Practice Analyzer. So that's actually a tool that you can run as part of a PowerShell script, and it sort of loops over your workspace or your report and tells you if you're using the best models, if you're using the best code, or any of the sort of practices you've implemented in that model. It tells you if you're using best practice, and gives you sort of a nice summary board on if you're doing things in the right way. And then there's DAX. So DAX stands for Data Analyst Expressions. You've probably heard of DAX, but you might not know what it's for. And it's basically a collection of functions and operators and constants that we can use to calculate new things from our data. So generally, if you're sort of a data scientist, you think of feature engineering. This is probably what you would use DAX for, creating new kind of features or attributes. And I'm just going to jump over to Power BI. So hopefully you can see my screen still. And this is a very, very poor report that I've built from the Northwind data. So I don't know if it's a kind of fake data about a fictitious company that sell products. The really nice thing is that the data is really, really related. Again, it's where most people kind of learn about SQL, to be honest. So you can see how related the data is. And Power BI is incredible because as you load this in, it automatically finds the relationships between these things and builds those relationships for you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about DAX. And if I go to the employees table, for example, I can see I've got this very, very simple thing I want to calculate. I want to calculate the full name. So I want the last name plus the first name. So I can just go new column. It can be a bit slow, but it will work eventually. It can be very slow, in fact. So I want the full name to be the first name. And as I start typing, it automatically predicts. So from the employees table, I want to, oh no, it's not plus. I'm getting my languages mixed up. So I want to append this. So I use an ampersand to a space because I don't want them stuck together. And then another ampersand, and then my last name. I press enter. I press enter again, and then assuming I haven't made too many mistakes, you can see my full name column is created on the right hand side. So very simple stuff. I'd say sort of think of Excel, probably a good way to go about it. Obviously, you can do much more complicated things like building and creating measures on your data. Again, if I wanted to create a new column on this is the order details. So I've got things like the quantity and unit price, but bizarrely, they don't have an order total, if I can spell correctly. So this would be the unit price, of course, multiplied by the quantity. Press enter, wait a few seconds because it is quite slow, and I do not have a slow machine by any means. And you can see it already sorts out all of the data type for me. And it's kind of intuitive. That's a nice thing about DAX. You can kind of, because of the sort of autocomplete, it is very intuitive and very, 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 very quick to pick up. Something else I wanted to show you as well was one of the other reasons I think Power BI is so popular and is running away with the competition. And that's the amount of common data sources that you can connect to. There are so many in here. If I click more and wait, apparently. There are so many different connections that we can make in here. It's just kind of mind-boggling, really. And one really interesting one that I will actually show you is if I jump to my browser and we go to construction news, and this is a website that I always end up presenting about. I like this website. They've got some high-level information about top 50 construction contractors in May. Okay, it's a bit old. They stopped updating it since the dreaded C word. And they've got the top 50 clients again in the month, the top 50 clients in the year. But anyway, there's some nice data in here, and I have a bot which web scrapes this all the time, although there's not a lot of point doing it at the moment. But and I can look at the data going back. But if I wanted a snapshot at the time, I just grab this link. I jump back to here. I want to use the web connector, and then I wait. It'll ask me for the URL. I'm happy with basic here. I just click OK, and then it's going to connect to it. It's automatically going to provide kind of a preview box here of what we want to pull in. And the really clever thing is it's making a request to that website. It's pulling down that HTML document, and just like you would if you were web scraping in Python, if that means anything to you, it's automatically finding the tables in there, which is so clever. You can see it's pulled out 5 tables, actually 6 tables. 5 of them have come from HTML. And I can just say, I'm going to take that first table, and that's that first table of data, the whole table. So I can just go and take, I'm going to take all of them. Why not? I click load. Power BI has just disappeared for some reason. But here we go. It's processing those queries, evaluating them for me. And then the nice thing is that I'm not working with static data. I'm working, okay, ironically, I am, because they're not updating it, but you see what I mean. If they were updating this on a regular basis, every time I hit refresh in here, I'm getting a fresh copy of the data, and I'm not building static reports. So you can see the power of Power BI immediately. It's not just about connecting to an Excel file that somebody's emailed you. It's about connecting to dynamic data sources like SharePoint lists, Google Analytics, websites, SQL Server, graph databases, and building, real-time analytics. It's incredible. It is very slow, and I've managed to speak for a long time and it's still not loaded. Detecting relationships. Finally, it's loaded all this information. So if we just collapse the Northwind data, you can see here's all, here's the contractor deals and rank information. Again, if I just go to home and a quick refresh, you can see you're going to get a fresh copy of that data. So again, I won't say any more on that for now. Okay, Power Query. Power Query and DAX get confused a little bit. People think that DAX is the language of Power BI, but it really has two languages. So it has Power Query and DAX. And what Power Query does is it lets you kind of act on or clean anything, any of the imported data. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if I go to transform data up here, go in there to transform data, I get a completely separate window here called Power Query Editor. And this is where I can write Power Query. So I can look in the advanced editor, and this is all the code so far in the report. So how it brings it in from a particular location on my machine, the fact that headers have been promoted and the data types have been changed, and it shows you those applied steps. That's a really powerful thing on the right hand side. So all of these steps, just like you would in a data pipeline, are being applied in a logical order. So the source, then we're navigating certain, moving certain columns around. We're promoting headers because it was a bit confused that this was actually data. So we just promoted the headers, and then we changed the data types. And then in here, we can do all types of things like we can pivot columns up and down, if you remember how to do that in Excel, convert things to list, we can do replace values, we can rename columns, we can do rounding, introduce trigonometry, we can even run Python scripts in here. So Power BI automatically has a few packages installed in the Power BI service, like pandas, NumPy, matplotlib, scikit-learn. So if I deploy this, so if I build this report and then deploy it to the Power BI service, I can still run these Python scripts, albeit very slowly, but I can. So I could have a web scraping script that will web scrape something for me. And then as long as I'm using data frames in Python, then it'll all just work. Or maybe I'm even doing some low-level machine learning using scikit-learn, some classification problem. It'll all work with inside my report. So really, 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 really clever stuff. I'm not suggesting that that's how you deploy your models at all, but it is possible. Right. So hopefully you sort of understand the difference between DAX and Power Query, because I do think they are confused quite a lot. And some of the machine learning capabilities, so I just touched on running kind of scikit-learn models within published reports, but it's also got quite a lot of automatic, what they call auto ML, auto machine learning built into Power BI. So there's the key influences. It's not a visualization anymore. It was a visualization, but it's now moved out of pre-preview and it's actually part of the ribbon at the top. So you can sort of reverse engineer some of your data and see which features or attributes are really influencing that result. And on the left-hand side, you can actually sort of employ or start to sort of piggyback off of sort of traditional machine learning models. So things like logistic regression or decision trees, or maybe even linear regression. And you don't need to necessarily know what's happening. It's very black box in that sense, but you can easily start to forecast and make classification insights just using sort of out of the box tools from Microsoft. and a bit more inspiration about what was done with Power BI at the hackathon. So this was actually the winner of the last hackathon. This was a challenge presented by Sir Robert McAlpine and worked on by 2 of our apprentices, which I think they were very, very proud of the solution. But basically, McAlpine were using a printer. They were printing out these diagrams on site and annotating them as they go. And they managed to digitize a lot of these things in Power BI and then sort of remove that need to print them. And then they could even start to get other insights around sort of how complete the rooms were. It made that sort of reporting side completely go away, which was really, really great. And like I said, they sort of blew us away in the presentation, and they were the winners. Incredible. PowerApps. So I'm going to move on from data visualization and talk about another part of the Power Platform. So some of the main features of PowerApps is that they're sort of a low level, low code way to interact with data. And they can connect to lots of different things like SQL, SharePoint lists. You can even connect them to Excel files if you need to. They obviously integrate well with things like Power Automate and sometimes even Power BI. And you can use them through the web browser or on your phone or on your tablet as well. And again, I've got some good examples about those coming up. So they do integrate really well with AI Builder, which is a low-code AI platform for the Microsoft. So if you imagine you had some kind of app on site collecting information on your productivity, and you wanted to classify that with the sentiment either positive or negative. Sorry, my dog behind me is crying. Then sorry, lost my train of thought there completely. You could easily piggyback off a pre-trained sentiment analysis machine learning model and classify your data. Then again, you could use something like text recognition. So you could use an out-of-the-box optical character recognition model to convert forms into digitized text, or something like detect the language of a form. All of that you could use. So models that have taken, tens of years of development to create, and you can have them at your fingertips with no to almost no code. Again, they're not going to solve things like MPAN's problem or Forecast or Shark Tower, because they are bespoke models that they're building. But for anything out of the box, then what Microsoft really say is that sort of 80 to 90% of machine learning problems can be solved with an out of the box solution. And it's that sort of 20 to 10% that they are MPlans, your Forecast, your Shark Towers. So, it's a great service. Obviously, you do have to pay for it. But it's incredible what we have access to now. And I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of what something we worked on very recently, very, very recently in the last sort of few months with Sir Robert McAlpine. And this is their prioritization tool. So they have an initial landing page, and you have 2 different users. So we have the core users and the exec users, and they have all of these use cases, and they're struggling to prioritize their development. So they were using the core users to say how difficult it is, and give some sort of metric around and prioritization. And then the top 5 of those are passed on to the exec users, where they make a separate set of scorings on those user stories. And then they finally create a prioritization for their development. So then it's sent to their development teams. So they're using sort of the whole business for working out what their development priorities are. And we help them sort of develop and deploy this. And I'm not going to talk through the whole diagram because it's quite heavy going. But here's an example of the tool in action. So you can see you're a part of the core team, and you have your use case there, which you select, and we've got 2 to vote on. So we vote on things like the usefulness of the data in the data hub, the ease of transformation and data quality, the output clarity, the ease of development, the business team priority. Once we've done that, we just click submit your ratings, and that is automatically captured for us. And you can see that user story is just removed, so we can't vote on it again. And the nice thing is that once we've completely filled out and just made up all the scores for this one, then we'll have no use cases. So the person can then put that member of the core team that is there done, they can close the app. But what we can actually do is we can just change ourselves to the exec team or senior team, and then we can just reload the app quickly. And now we can see what the exec team is going to be working on. So they actually have a slightly different scoring system that we developed. So they have 100 points to distribute as they choose through various different sort of scoring mechanisms. And we were using this, we designed this app so it sends notifications. It works on a monthly basis. So if you haven't filled it out, it will send you a notification a few days before the deadline. And that it allows Sir Robert McAlpine to kind of keep their development cycles quite short and quite agile. And then once you've filled out all of that, you can see that there are no more use cases for you to work on. And the nice thing is it was all user-based. So as long as you had an admin person setting the right users to the correct roles, then the whole thing just worked quite seamlessly. So that was Power Apps. Now I'm going to talk about Power Automate, and I am going to tie all these things together. So if you feel like they're all quite siloed, don't panic. I've got something that should really help. And if you've never heard of Power Automate, it's a cloud-based service that allows users to sort of create and automate different processes and actions. And it can be used to automate workflows between apps and services, collect data, get notifications, process emails, and loads more. I initially thought Power Automate was quite restrictive, and I think if you, at a first glance, it is, but the more I look at it, the more powerful it is. It's obviously part of the Microsoft suite, so it works really well with things like SharePoint, Outlook, Microsoft Forms, really well with Power Apps, of course. And they've made the sort of creation, testing and deployment like really easy. I mean, if you've ever struggled with automation deployment using other bits of software, that's because it's quite hard. And they've made it, I'm not going to say foolproof, but much easier. And they've just released a new kind of feature, which is UI flow. So you can automate process that you can run not only in the browser, but also in Windows as well. So they've got automation at the UI level, which is really exciting, something I've been waiting for a long time. And I've got an example on the next page. So you can see they've got the front end, which is what you'd see as the user, and they've got a back end where you've got all your kind of error logging, etc. I'm going to run the process, and what we're doing was just logging into a web page with all of our credentials. So you can see it navigating to the web page, and the back end, creating kind of all the logs of what's been happening. The web page just loading here. You can see it filling in the information, and then the process is finished. So if there was an error, we would have really great evidence of this in the logs. And this is sort of certainly white space for Microsoft stepping into automation at the UI level. So really exciting. And then just a really quick overview of what we've talked about. So Power Apps, I'm just getting a bit of feedback from someone else. So just everyone on the call, just double check that you are muted, just to make sure I'm not having to fight to talk over something. That would be great. Power Apps, it's an application environment to build custom apps in a low-code environment. And again, I've got a really good example in a minute. Power BI, a data visualization tool that users use to convert unrelated sources of data into something interactive and insightful. Now, Power Automate is automation generally for your mundane, repetitive tasks. And something I didn't mention is the Microsoft bot framework, which is brand new. So this is an Azure bot that sort of acts as your virtual agent. So think Alexa, think Google. I'm not going to say those. I'm not going to say the words to wake it up because mine's right next to me, and it will cause me a problem. So I've given some quite isolated examples of those things. And you might think, how can I use all those together? Okay, fine. Like the Python's great cleaning stuff, but I'm not going to download Anaconda and start cleaning. How does it all work? How does that all sit together in one holistic example? So here's something we worked on with Osborne, again, very recently in the last, I don't know, time flies, but 4 months, definitely within the last 4 months, that uses Python, Power BI, PowerApps, and Power Automate. So all the P's together. So this diagram, I just want you to completely ignore this for the time being and let me describe the old system and the motivation for the project. I'm just going to check the time, 6:30. So when Osborne ordered a delivery, somebody in the office would make that web order, and then a few days later, that a truck would turn up on site, and somebody would be dragged away from their job to shoved in front of a tablet or a laptop and told to record what had been delivered. So generally, they would have like an Excel sheet, and they would write down like 5 packets of sugar and some spoons and other things, probably more construction related things. Obviously, with what the workers on site were writing down and the invoice that the finance team were receiving, there was obviously a lot of disparity. They didn't, the people on site don't want to be writing out like massive sentences of stuff. They're just going to abbreviate things. They're going to call it the wrong name. This is a bad system, and workers obviously not happy with this. That's the last thing they want to be doing when they're in the middle of a job, is being told to type up a load of stuff on Excel. So system wasn't good. We have a good relationship with Osborne, and this is something that we kind of collaborated on. So now you're allowed to look at the diagram. If I could cast your eyes to the left-hand side where a web order is made. So out of the back of the web order, there is an order confirmation that's sent through. And we could pick this up because it's all in Outlook using Power Automate. And we push that order confirmation to what we call Azure Functions, which was quite easy to do. And then Azure Functions is an environment that can run Python code. So we deployed some Python code through Visual Studio to Azure Functions. If you think of Azure Functions as a bit like a VM, if you've ever used VMs that run, say you're running Linux on it, and then that's probably close enough to the truth. Conveniently, the order confirmation had embedded HTML. So when you see websites in emails, and they sometimes look a bit clunky, to be honest, that was useful for us because Python has a really, really awesome modules for working with HTML. Things like requests and Beautiful Soup, mainly Beautiful Soup. So you could parse, using Python, we say parse, I guess I mean kind of convert it into a format where we can easily extract the bits of information we want from that HTML, so basically a website, into structured data. So you can see now we're coming from Azure Functions. We converted that email into really, really structured data, and then we saved it in a SharePoint list. I think we're going to be migrating over to SQL Server at some point, hopefully. And then the app was built from that structured data in SharePoint, and then we could actually build summary sort of analysis off the back of it. So how many times are we ordering from certain suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. So all the kind of KPIs that might be associated with those deliveries. So you can see we use PowerApps for the sort of end user interaction. We use Power BI for the KPIs. we use Python sat inside Azure Functions to sort of, I guess, clean. It's more like an ETL process, so extracting the data from the email and saving it as structured data. And we use Power Automate to push the data around. And then I've got a demonstration. So this is the Power App. So you log in with your username and password. Not actually necessary, because you must be logged in with your user credentials for Power Apps to work. You select the site that you're on, and then you select the vendor. We've got a lot of the development data in here, so that's why it all looks a bit strange. And then you select the delivery note, so the delivery that's actually in front of you. And this is real data, real things that are delivered on site. So you'd say, yes, there's a dinner knife. Yes, the tissues. Yes, the milk is here. Yes, our bag of sugar. But you could put a comment in there like, it was 8 grains less than was delivered last time. Or on the right-hand side, you can add a new item. And then you could also add a new delivery note. If there was no delivery note in the system, then you go home. So, you know, a really, really great solution for Osborne. It cuts out the sort of middleman of dragging somebody off site and irritating them. Yeah, I think Osborne are really pleased with it. So I'm going to jump back to Menti now. If I could please encourage you to pull your phone up or pull the browser back, and we can go through these next questions. So the next question I've got is, what would greatness look like in your company? So I know it's late. I know we're all tired, but it would be great if people, so we've still got nearly 40 people on the call. It'd be great to have half of us responding to this. So automation, improve bottom line, controlling costs, sure. Anyone else? Innovation, data sharing, discussion around data infrastructure to capture good data, saving time with the reduction of errors, yeah. Easy access to data, that's so difficult to do because people are so concerned about data, sort of data breaches. Being data driven, able to focus on higher value activities, absolutely. Real-time data whenever we need it. Yeah, no, it's so frustrating looking at old data when you know there's newer data out there. Getting insights from data, yeah, of course. Seamless data flow. Able to focus on higher value activities. I think that's so important to all of us. You know, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges. I think we're all running around like firefighting is not the best use of all of our time. We should be focusing and taking a step back and doing what humans do really well. So that's really great. Thank you. For over 20 people have responded to that, so I really appreciate that. Okay, do you view this as an opportunity or a threat? So one person said opportunity so far. No, it's shooting up now. Thank you, everyone. Everyone says opportunity, 14 of us, 16 of us. That's great, very positive. One person says threat. Not so good when the numbers are so small, and that's suddenly 5% of us. But that's really great. That's really, really awesome. It seems very positive. Glad I haven't been all doom and gloom. And how could this improve your job or career? So think automation, think data pipelines, think, yeah, think data visualization, think making data-driven solutions. Less manual work, sure. Make mine far more interesting. Yeah, couldn't agree more. More time spent interpreting data, less stress, more time to lead, think and be proactive. more bridges built between technical and non-technical teams. Yeah, I think that would being, we talk about this translator role in the community a lot. I think that's really what our apprentices are sort of starting to facilitate. They're not getting able to, they're overcoming all these barriers of jargon and stuff, which I think project data analytics is, can be guilty of. Helping to become, oh no, it's gone. The next opportunity to learn and share learning and expert translator, which is really great. Fewer errors, reinventing myself, so really positive. Free up time to focus on bigger concepts. Data-driven decision-making, automated threshold and windows management. Free up time for innovation. Focusing on efficiency. Super excited about pulling Power BI from data from so many different sources. That's good. Hopefully that was me giving you that little bit of inspiration there. Lots of learning opportunities. I really think there is so much that we can learn and improve our individual jobs and sort of start to conform to this data capability feeding into teams as opposed to these sort of centralized teams. Okay, I am going to push on. And how could you deploy project data analytics in your role? Do you think you could use it in more than 50% of your role, from 20% to 50%, from 5% to 20%, on the fringe, or not applicable? So again, I've got the segmentation here with the roles, which is really interesting. So I really love to see where sort of engineers, BIM people, academics sit. So that we did have some academics in the call. I'd love to know where that's sat in on here. So we've got 22 people replying to this, 38 of us on the call. So just push that up a little bit. That would be great if you wouldn't mind. But certainly the leadership roles, thinking between sort of 20 and 50% of their role could benefit from these things. The project managers, project controls, maybe not so convinced. So I need to work a bit hard on the project managers, but certainly, a fifth of their role could benefit from these things. Data professionals, they're certainly, it's really interesting. So 50% of the data people we've got on the call think that more than 50% of their role could benefit from this. And I guess that's no surprise. But it certainly feels like, the people that are using these things feel like they could take it a lot further as well. So I guess that's certainly in agreement with what we were saying around the Gartner chart, and maybe people sitting around the lower end of that, and there's certainly a lot more to squeeze out of efficiency and productivity. So really interesting. 23 people replied. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so I said it's not all about the tech, and I really mean that. It's not just about learning cool things as much as I love to learn. And I think what I encourage you to think about is that data analytics, isn't equivalent to one of these ink block tests. Don't just look at data and think, what can I do with it, and stare at it and wait until something emerges. So don't look at this picture and think, is it Spider-Man? Is it a skull? Is it that mask guy from Crash Bandicoot? We shouldn't be doing that. We should be thinking, what's the problem that I want to solve? I start with that, and then I collect the data that I need to solve that problem, not the other way around. At the moment, and this is my biggest bugbear, is that we collect data that's cheap and easy. Data storage is suddenly become quite cheap. So we just pump it all into data lakes, data swamps, and then we think, oh, we just keep that for a rainy day. And then, even as part of the hackathons are awesome, but it is a reoccurring theme where people come with data and then try and think of problems. And, we should absolutely finding out what the 10 problems a business has, and then thinking of a strategy to collect that data even if it takes 10 years, you know, if we can show a return on investment, then that's what we should be doing. And at the moment, I would argue that we are not quite there. And I think part of the problem is data collection has, like I said, has suddenly become so cheap and easy. So that leads me on to some of the challenges. And the first one being the sort of this misalignment between the problems and the data. So it's exactly what I said about people thinking what's in the data, as opposed to what problems we want to solve, and then what data do we need to solve those problems. There's obviously a problem with legacy data. Companies are sat on massive amounts of legacy data in old systems. They can't get it out. They don't know what to do with it. It's not very clean. And a lot of the data they have is siloed and unconnected. So whether it's in the legacy data or whether it's in systems that people subscribe to, like I know, Datascope, FieldView, or whatever it might be, they can't connect them together because they don't have access to the data. And what do? Do you take your own copy of it, put it in your own database, and then connect it together? You need to come up with a strategy for that. Data quality has impacts on all these other things. I mean, at the bottom, we've got no high-level buy-in. If organizations struggle to show the return on investment of using data, how are you going to get high-level buy-in? And if your data is poor quality, you can't show that return on investment. So these things are, you know, are kind of cyclic, really. They feed each other, which would be so frustrating to break that. Insufficient data volumes, like I said, you might have identified the problems, but it takes a long time to collect enough data to do anything with it. And you need to manage people's expectations with how quickly you're going to get that return on investment. You might have company data, and what you really need is data about your supply chain. So you need to think about how you can encourage your supply chain to capture the right information and then make it at least open enough for you to view what you need to view. And maybe a lack of data model and design. So your organization might be quite immature in this respect, and you might not have the correct architecture to solve the problems you need. There might be a problem around ownership. So who owns the data? Are we allowed to use it? Can we use it commercially? Can we use it on this particular contract? This all can be a bit of a minefield. And what about the trustworthiness in data? The example I like to give is, have you ever been in your car with the sat-nav on and you're 5 miles from home and the sat-nav suddenly says turn left, and you think, nah, I don't turn left here. I know where I am. I'm 5 miles from home. I've done this 1,000 times. And you ignore the sat-nav, and then suddenly there's a crash in front of you, all the roads closed, and then you suddenly think, oh, that's why the sat-nav said I should turn left. And this is because you don't trust it. You don't have trust in it. And I think there are definitely examples of that within projects as well, where we automatically assume what we think is correct and that the data is wrong. And we need to somehow get trustworthiness in the data. And I think one of the biggest problems is that everyone's too busy. Everybody's running around firefighting, running around with their pants on their head, just trying to get stuff done. We're all, you know, people mention being stressed and being busy. We need to think, you need a lot of space to think strategically about how your organization's going to evolve and develop. And you can't do that if you're running from fire to fire. It just doesn't work. And then we've already mentioned things like no high level buy-in can be impossible to get if you can't demonstrate the benefit. So you need to think, again, very strategically about how you're going to do that. And while we're on the subject of being strategic, you need to think about your as-is model. So what's the company like? What are your aspirations? So what's your to-be state? What's your target operating model? You know, what is your end goal ultimately? Come up with a roadmap to get there. Think about the funding that you would need to get. Again, can be a huge blocker. You'll need sponsors and champions. You need people that are incredibly resilient, that are going to push and push and push and push these through and never drop them. And if you don't have that, you know, fighting that organizational change is going to be impossible, and you can't do it on your own. You need to make sure you've got the right governance in place. You can't just give people access to all the things we've just mentioned. It will be chaos. So you need to make sure the governance is placed that gives people the right access to things, but doesn't restrict them so they can't do anything. And you need to make sure you've got the right skills and the right know-how in the business. So do you need to recruit, or do you need to upskill people? And have you got the right tools and architecture? Have you got access to the right pieces of software and hardware? And you need to think about your data model, etc. So problem solving. So what questions are we trying to answer? And that's really your use cases. And then we can break those use cases down into user stories and identify sort of your specific pain points that we're trying to address. And then once we've got that, we can think about the data model. So what data do we need to answer the questions? Not what data have we got, but what data do we need to answer the questions? What sort of quality does it need to be? How do we connect it all together? So this example I was talking about with the aggregated project information, if we want to, dig into the causality, how do we connect that with the work breakdown structure so that we always know the initial phase of a project is where it's all going wrong for nuclear, for example. And then finally, the sort of engineer's approach to this is, what's the gap analysis between, what we've set out to do, our aspirations, and what we can actually do today with the data we've got. And then from there, you can sort of cycle back to the top. And you might need to do this a few times and certainly kind of start to refine the data you've got so that we can answer the problems that are important to us. And really, this can take years to collect the data. We need to connect data in a clever way. So we need to think about all the systems and that we're using where our data is only available to us through APIs. How can we connect that together to get the causality, which is what we're really, really craving at the moment. We need to make sure we automate data pipelines as much as we can to increase quality and volumes. And I really believe that companies with a vision will, outperform the people that aren't thinking about this stuff. And some advice, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could, I guess, if I could give you some advice, it would be to don't just jump straight into creating dashboards. That's what I've seen a lot, and I see it at ACK, and I try to sort of encourage people not to do that. Start with the question, think about the data quality and volumes that are required. Think about how you're going to develop robust data pipelines to create the data that you haven't got. Wherever you can, remove the human in the loop. It increases not only efficiency and productivity, but you can also, improve your staff force morale if people aren't doing mundane tasks. And you can even kind of piggyback off things like training, so structured training to take those kind of low value tasks off so many people in businesses. It's so easy to do these days. Correlation doesn't necessarily equal causality. So you've got to think about symptoms and cause. You can't go charge if you see correlation between a project going over budget or over schedule, then that may have a symptom. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the cause. So you've got to think really carefully around the sort of symptom and cause concepts as well, and understand the range of capabilities that are available to you and what you need and how you might have to deploy them. And I think something that that's really difficult. One of the main problems is how you influence people, how you sell the vision, how you create a plan that gets buy-in and demonstrates the return on investment you need, how you can create a compelling argument for change, and really how you compete with other priorities. Like I said, all the firefighting that happens in organizations at the moment. Everything we do in our lives is a matter of priorities. And in order to make change in this area, we need to make sure that the sort of data agenda is moving up the priority chain. you need to create an urgency about it and gain commitment from high-level members in the organization. Overcome objections. You might have naysayers, so you need to think about how you're going to deal with them. You need to encourage others to collaborate. I really think that collaboration is the key, and data pooling is the key. Our hackathons are all about democratizing solutions. It's not about people spending 6 hours on creating a report and then hanging on to that for their intellectual property. I think we all need to be collaborating and making everything more efficient and productive. And again, trust. We need to get people to trust the results and trust the sat nav when it says turn left. So your journey down the road to project data analytics greatness, I really encourage you to get involved. We've got a cross-sector initiative to drive change across the platform now. And this is the task force that's really going to create the foundation for a transformational approach. And we really want you to get involved. If you do want to, please get in touch with either myself or Martin Paver, our CEO, through LinkedIn or in my email, or however you want to. And I said I'd give you sort of an overview of how maybe you can invest some time personally in this. That isn't necessarily influencing your peers, but what can you do about your own kind of knowledge? And I've got some different options here, and I've sort of clumped them together in these three different areas. So experimenting, tactical but unsure, and then strategic and committed. And obviously they go from top to bottom in terms of increasing levels of commitment. So experimenting is really it's really on demand. It's great for casual learning, but it can be outdated. There's no one to ask. It's full of bits that aren't relevant. Tactical but unsure. It's great. It develops confidence. Effort could be Effort could be potentially better spent elsewhere. It can be tough to stay motivated because you might not feel like you're spending your time in an optimal way. You can have strategic and committed approach to upskilling. So maybe rounded, structured learning from an apprenticeship or an academy, something that's based on project delivery with practical support. But of course, there is a big time commitment to that. And I keep seeing some stuff appear on the screen, which is strange. And then just a quick plug for our Project Data Academy. So it's a 15-month scheme. It's 95 to 100% funded by government. It's delivered by experts, of which I am included in that list, a bit tongue in cheek. Age ranges from 19 to 60 plus. So, there's a really wide range of ages in there, which is really great. And, we really encourage people to become a pathfinder in project data analytics to get ready for this inevitable future. And we've got companies like Computershare, Mace, Balfour BT, McLaren Construction, Ishiango, Langer Rourke, Jacobs, Kia, Rob McAlpine, Baker Hughes, Cis, Costain and Osborne. And we cover all the things we've looked at today in a lot of detail and a lot more. So things like Scikit-learn, SQL Server, Neo4j, and like I said, all the other things in a lot more detail. It's obviously all on Zoom at the moment as well. So get ready for an inevitable future. This is the World Economic Forum that was published very recently, and they said that the data analysts and scientists are going to be the most increasing demanding job. It's a very rewarding career. I can certainly vouch for that. We encourage you to become a kind of pathfinder. Next cohort of the apprenticeship starts on the 16th of November, and we can onboard you in a week. The cohort after that starts in January, and my glamorous colleague is going to paste that bit.ly link in the chat for you. So if you want to check out our website, you can certainly do that. And if you want to get in touch, then please take a screenshot of the slide now and contact our learning and development manager. That's vicky@projectingsuccess.co.uk. Again, if you want to talk to me about that, then please message me on LinkedIn and I'll get back to you. And Project Hack. So it's just hit 7 o'clock. I'm just going to talk about Project Hack for a few minutes, if that's okay. Project Hack 7 is our next hackathon on the 7th and 8th of November. And we've got, I think, 13 or 14 challenges, 6 masterclasses, hopefully over 100 attendees, £3,000 worth of prizes, and numerous top tier organizations like Petrofac, Baker Hughes, Ishango, Stroud McAlpine, and loads of others, and some really exciting challenges around material requisition data. We've got Baker Hughes, again, wanting some insights into their EPC projects, health and safety challenges from Petrofac, and lots of others. We've got some masterclasses from Rishi, Joel, and myself. And we've got 3 additional masterclasses from the Microsoft team as well. So they're going to be talking about app development, automation, data reporting. I'm going to be talking about machine learning at various different levels for people as well. And just some attendees from the last hack. So a lot of beginners that you can see that sort of levels in data competency. So please don't be intimidated about attending. I think the cost is about £20-ish, and all the proceeds of that go to cancer research. So it's all for a good cause as well. And you can see that about half of the typical roles were project professionals. So please don't be intimidated. Come along. It should be a great event. And £2,000 worth of prizes will go to the winning team. So that is a super exciting prize pot. I think it's tripled since the last hack. So some of the projects I'm going to mention in a minute are kind of reflect what we're going to be doing on a sort of obviously much smaller scale, but it's real people, it's real challenges, it's real business ready solutions, and it's community focused. And here's a bit of a word cloud for how you could describe the last project hack in one word. And of course, we took out all the negative stuff. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, it's fun, challenging, inspiring, interesting, educational, collaborative. It's stimulating. It is a brilliant excuse to spend your weekend working on fun projects like this. So I've overrun a little bit. It's now 7:03, so I am sorry about that. Project data analytics. Is it a no-brainer? Have I managed to convince you? And if I could get you to just jump back to Menti, I'd really appreciate it. I know it's late. I know it's Friday. And just to answer, to what extent is project data analytics to you a no-brainer? We've got 100% agree. I'm a strong supporter. That's awesome. I'm still making up my mind. Well, let me know if you want to have another chat about that, and I'll see if I can persuade you. That's brilliant. So yeah, we've got 94% of people saying they're at least a strong supporter, which is brilliant. And I'm not going to push for too many numbers because I appreciate it is late. How will you adopt to this disruption? Attend hacks, self-learn videos, attend meetups. I don't need to. Explore more structured programs like apprenticeships. So somebody's going to come to the hack, good. Self-learn videos, more structured programs like the apprenticeship. That's great. So about a quarter of us saying we're going to go to meetups, just over that about the hacks, self-learn videos. I mean, yeah, YouTube is a great resource. What I would say about apprenticeships, the things, the different projects that I've seen apprentices work on throughout the 50 learners we have on board now are make me incredibly proud. The things that they've managed to achieve as a product of the apprenticeship is absolutely astonishing. So I certainly would encourage people to explore that kind of option as well. And that's really great. Thank you to everybody for responding to that, 22 people. And then a very direct question, so I'm not beating around the bush here at all. Would you speak to your organization to try and enroll on the academy? One person, that's good. Unlikely, that's fair enough. It's not for everyone, so I'm not going to be too upset. Not applicable, that's reasonable. Definitely in the next 2 months, 3 people saying that, that's good. Unlikely, but still possible. So not going to discount those people. And this, I believe this is the last question I've got. So If people could interact with this, that would be great. And if you are sat in that definitely now, or definitely in the next 2 months, you know, please get ready to take a picture of my contact information at the end to get in touch. Like I said, I'm the main tutor. So if you've not hated listening to me throughout this evening, then you probably won't hate listening to me throughout the rest of the apprenticeship. And yeah, I'm gonna jump back to my slides and flash up some of my contact information. So this is my LinkedIn. Pull out your phone or press print screen if you want to add me on LinkedIn. I will probably have a slight influx of invitations, but I will get round to accepting them all. But for now, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much to everybody who listened.